Can I start with a very simple, very important question? If you become Prime Minister, when you become Prime Minister, do you want this country to leave the EU or not?
We're going to put that choice to the British people and they will make that decision. We'll negotiate within 3 months a credible, sensible option of leave and put that alongside Remain in a referendum.
I'm asking about your view. You'll be Prime Minister, you hope, after the election. Okay. As Prime Minister, do you, Jeremy Corbyn, want us to leave the EU or not?
I want a close relationship with the EU in the future, and we will put that decision to the British people, and I will abide by that decision. That's the view we've come to in the Labour Party.
You want a close relationship with the EU, which implies that we are outside the EU at that point.
A leave option.
Close but outside. Is that what you'd like, personally?
A leave option would mean a trade relationship with Europe, and it would mean protection of rights, and obviously that includes protection of the Good Friday Agreement. That would be put alongside Remain in a referendum within 6. And my whole strategy has been to try and bring people together on both sides of the argument, because actually there's a great deal that unites them about the inequalities and injustices in this country.
I understand the strategy. There's an awful lot of people watching, and they're trying to make up in their minds who they want to be the next Prime Minister of this country. And I'm asking you, as somebody who seeks that job, a very important job, what your own personal view is about leaving the EU or not. It's the biggest single question facing a lot of people in this country, and they have a right to know the answer.
It's one of the biggest questions facing the people in this country. The answer is, as I've explained to you, that we will negotiate a credible option of leaving, put that alongside Remain, and the British people will make their mind up on that basis, and we will discuss this, obviously, when we've concluded those initial negotiations, which will start immediately we take office.
So Jeremy Corbyn can't say, I think we should leave the EU, or we shouldn't leave the EU, or I prefer to be in, or I prefer to be out.
Jeremy Corbyn can say this, that we have to have a close trading relationship with Europe. We won't crash out into the arms of Donald Trump. We won't be doing sweetheart trade deals with the USA, and we won't be wrecking our National Health Service in the process, as the Prime Minister is planning to do.
That's a very persuasive way of not answering my question. But your plan now is that you win the election, and then you go to Brussels for some 6 months or so.
3 months.
3 months to negotiate a different Brexit deal. And you're going in there negotiating that Brexit deal with your Chancellor, your Home Secretary, your Foreign Secretary, your Brexit Secretary, almost all the key members of your cabinet saying publicly that whatever you negotiate, they would campaign in the referendum for Remain. It's not a very strong army at your back, really, is it?
Well, you don't know who I'm going to take with me into those negotiations.
But you're not going to sack John McDonnell, no. Diane Abbott, Keir Starmer,
there would obviously
Emily Thornberry.
be a team of people who would be involved in this, and they would be representative of all parts of the UK and of areas that have different views on it, as indeed...
So you bring Brexit voices in?
Can I finish? Thank you. When we had the talks with the UK government over the summer, we did have a very wide range of voices meeting the government on this, and I think it's very important that all parts of the country are represented in this, and that's what I would seek to do.
So you would bring pro-Brexit voices into those negotiations, into the cabinet, to help you do that negotiation?
There'll all be Labour voices that would have fought the election on the basis of the agreement we hope to reach with the European Union, which we'd put to the people of this country. Because I do think we've got to settle this, and that we settle it by agreeing on a relationship with Europe, either in or out.
I'm just trying to imagine being, as it were, the negotiator on the other side of the table in these negotiations. And I see Jeremy Corbyn coming to me, and I know that Diane Abbott, John McDonnell, Keir Starmer, Emily Thornberry, the leaders of the Labour Party in Scotland and Wales, and all the rest of it are clear pro-Remain voices. And here's the leader of the party, here's the Prime Minister, coming to try to negotiate to leave. And I ask myself, how serious is this negotiation?
What they would know, and they already know, because I've met all the senior negotiators in the European Union already several times over the past couple of 3 years, that we represent a country where a majority voted to leave, a very substantial minority voted to remain, and that those voices have got to be heard at the negotiating table. But however people voted in the referendum, they didn't vote to lose their job, they didn't vote for a deregulated society. My point is that all the government, the Prime Minister, is offering is actually a deal with the United States which will do immense damage to our National Health Service and indeed other services as well.
All right, so you've got a pro-Remain party in large part. You negotiate to leave nonetheless. You bring that deal back. Does that then go to the House of Commons?
It will go, of course, to the House of Commons, but will also go to a special conference of the Labour Party who will debate the issue at that time, as we agreed at our Brighton conference.
Because if you look at the views of Labour MPs as expressed publicly, again, there's lots and lots of Labour MPs who say they are thoroughly pro-Remain and will vote against any Brexit deal. You've got the Liberal Democrats, you've got the other parties there, you won't get Conservative supports. So I just wonder actually whether this deal has got the faintest chance of getting through the House of Commons.
Listen, we haven't had the election yet.
Sure.
We haven't had the negotiations yet. I want to make sure there's a credible offer of leave with these arrangements with the European Union or Remain and the future relationship with Europe. And I think it's only right that if we fight the election on a manifesto that includes those options, which is a way of bringing people together, which seems to me an adult approach to the whole thing.
So I'm just trying to take it through stage by stage by stage. You get your negotiation, you have the problem of Parliament, you have a special party conference, and then you have a referendum in which you're going to put your version of leave, which is pro-single market, yes?
It's pro-trade relationship, which obviously would include access to the market.
And it's pro-customs union. You negotiate
a way of protecting.
You negotiate a customs union.
Indeed, that is a very important way of protecting the Good Friday Agreement, because one of the many problems with the Prime Minister's approach to this is that it does undermine the principles of the Good Friday Agreement, which, of course, there's nothing I would want to do would undermine the Good Friday Agreement.
If you negotiate a customs union, you can't have an independent trade policy, can you?
You can have aspects of an independent trade policy, but clearly there would have to be that relationship. But I think we have to be realistic about where British trade is at the moment, and broadly speaking, about half of our trade is with the European Union.
We had a very large number of people taking part in the first referendum, the in or out referendum. Do you have some kind of threshold which would give you legitimacy for another referendum?
I think you have to hold a referendum on the basis that those who wish to take part in it take part in it. I think what I would like to see in any future referendum is a very strict limit on spending on both sides, and also the ability to, how shall I put it, check on the facts being offered by both sides in that referendum campaign. The problem with the last referendum campaign, there wasn't any real examination of that.
But nonetheless, 72% turned out. It was one of the biggest democratic events in our history. Indeed. I'm just wondering, you're going to offer people a choice between a soft Brexit or a Labour version of Brexit or remaining. Now, for an awful lot of people in this country, that is not a real choice. They don't get the kind of Brexit that they thought they were going to get, and therefore they may not vote. You may get a very much lower turnout. Is that still legitimate?
Offering a referendum is, of course, legitimate, and there's never been a precedent in Britain where we measure an election result on the basis of turnout. There has been precedent. The 1979 Scottish referendum was on the basis of the proportion of people voting a particular way, but there's never been any precedent on.
And you wouldn't turn back to that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But that would obviously be open for debate, but I do think the important thing is to move forward on this so that we actually get to a position of making a decision.
Okay. We paid around 11 billion into the EU budget last year in return for really good access, frictionless good access to their markets. They're going to want us to carry on paying in. Would you agree to that?
Well, it depends how much, and obviously that would be part of the negotiations. But clearly, if you want access to a market, there are costs involved. But
so there are costs.
Yes, there would be costs involved. I can't put a figure on that any more than you could or the EU could at this very moment.
Okay.
But the principle has to be that where we've got car plants in Sunderland, you've got manufacturing plants in the Midlands, you've got steel and many other industries, as well as food processing that rely very heavily on a European market. They've got to maintain that access to markets.
And similarly, if we are going to maintain the same kind of regulatory standards, at least as good as we've got now with the EU are going to want the regulation of the European Court of Justice to oversee some of that. Is that acceptable?
There has to be a legal process by which you determine any disputes, and even the Prime Minister and the government accept there has to be some judicial process that you can deal with any trade disputes. There are, within the World Trade Organization anyway, it's a principle of all trade agreements. There has to be some judicial oversight of them, but there is a question of the timing of that, and some of these things can go on for far too long.
And then there is the question of the fourth pillar, free movement of people. Your 2017 manifesto said very clearly, free movement of people will end when we leave the European Union. Will the current manifesto say the same thing?
Well, you'll have to wait until Thursday to see the wording of it.
You decided this yesterday, so you know the answer.
Yes, I'm going to come on to that in a moment. The point I'm making is that, first of all, a lot of European Union nationals have made their homes in this country and made a massive contribution to our society. A lot of British people live in different parts of the European Union, and many of those families have been through unbelievable levels of stress. So they absolutely must have the right to remain and be able to bring their families here, as indeed other aspects of family reunion should be available. And so,
as you
also,
know,
there are huge economic demands in this country. We have 40,000 nurse vacancies in the NHS, partly because of so many European Union nationals have left. We have a shortage of doctors because so many have left because of uncertainty. We cannot exist in isolation. Therefore, there has to be migration into Britain in order to maintain our economy and our services, and that will be reflected in the policy which you will see on Thursday.
So in terms of how you do it, the conference motion, the famous conference motion, said that Labour should maintain and extend free movement rights. What does the extend mean? Who do you mean? Where do you want to extend it to?
Well, I think the movers of the motion had in mind the questions of family reunion of people from both the European Union and other parts of the world as well, because what you have is people that wholly legitimately make their homes and their contribution here, but have an artificial income level put on them if they're allowed to bring partners or children into this country, and I think that is what was behind that motion. But
do you agree with the motion?
I agree with the principle that there has to be the right of family reunion, there has to be that right of joining a spouse or whatever in this country, but there also has to be a recognition that our economy and our society has been enriched massively by people that have made their homes here. And the Labour government not going to... No Labour government led by me will bring in a hostile environment such as Theresa May brought.
Very, very simple, very easy question. Will free movement end when we leave the EU?
There will be a great deal of movement.
A great deal of movement, so free movement will not end?
No, you'll have to wait until Thursday. I know you're very impatient. And
I am. I just want to get you to tell me what's going to happen.
Well, you'll know on Thursday.
Overall, immigration has been a huge issue around Brexit, and different voices in the Labour Party have felt different things. What I'm trying to work out is whether your instinct is for more free movement of people around the world, including from the EU.
My instinct is to recognise that economies are interdependent around the world, that we all benefit from people moving to, living in and working in different societies, and we benefit massively from the vast number of overseas students that come here. I don't want to turn my back on that. I don't want us to become an isolated society. I'm proud of the diversity of our society and our country, and I want that to be a basis of how we live.